Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next show. The medical system, healthcare system, is a complete and utter scam, at least large segments of it. And we're going to talk very openly, honestly, and transparently as three doctors who have been in practice for some time about the moment when we first realized the true extent of what an unfortunate scam the medical system is. And for those of you who enjoy our discussions, please do check out our own separate channel in the links down below, where we post a lot of exclusive content as well. Open discussions concerning your health and well-being. All right, Ben, do you want to go first? When you first realized that the system wasn't quite what you thought it was?
Well, I think there are a few moments that occurred in my career and in my training that stood out. But one of them that really kind of stood out to me was we had this patient who was diabetic and a very poorly controlled diabetic, and their doctor put them on ever higher doses of insulin, got them to see an endocrinologist, a specialist to help out, put them on multiple other diabetic medications, higher doses. Their sugars continued to be incredibly high. They went to multiple visits, saw multiple specialists, and finally went into the hospital for another issue, an infection. And it was found their sugars were incredibly high, and the nurse stood there and administered all their medications and made sure they took them. And this person completely crashed. The heart stopped. They coded. They had to be resuscitated because turns out they had never been taking any of these medications and no one had ever asked them. And it was so disheartening and upsetting that this person had seen so many people and no one had stopped for 5 seconds to say, "Hey, what's going on? Are you taking your medications? Are you getting them? What's going on here?" It was just this kind of blind giving more medications to treat a number without looking at the patient at all. And it was very eye-opening and upsetting. So
That is a very profound story. And that speaks to so much. That was the first moment when you realized, I'm assuming it was soon after you got into practice, that the medical system is not as it seems. It sounds like total failure of the doctors to understand where real person's taking.
Are we just full of assumptions? Are we just assuming that patients take medications? Are we assuming that patients should be on these medications? This is a perfect example. I think probably every doctor that they saw just assumed the other doctor was monitoring it, the communication breakdown and everything, and look what happened.
Yeah. And this is not infrequent. I mean, to expand that particular example, which is a great discussion, just assuming that somebody who has had mild medicines piled on is taking them and then just mindlessly copying it over when they get to hospital and having an adverse event and they weren't even taking the medications.
exactly, in my opinion, it's a disregard of the patient, right? It's not looking at the patient, it's looking at numbers and giving a medication to treat a number, which is a very common phenomenon in medicine where you worry about a symptom or a number and you've medication, pill, but nobody stops to say, wait, what's going on? What's wrong with them? Let's take a look. How you doing? What are you doing? How is this? How did we get here? And that just shows the kind of pharmaceutical influence on the industry as opposed to the doctor-patient relationship when you really know people and they're not afraid to open up to you and tell you what's going on. So
Yeah. And I also think this speaks volumes. And I know we have strong feelings on it, the three of us, about the computerized systems currently, how I call it mass misinformation. So here's a scenario with modern day medical records, because in the past, everything was sort of handwritten and reviewed more. But now these records get transcribed over and over. Maybe you all have a story to tell. Feel free to comment down below. But you have these medication lists, which are wildly inaccurate. They're not true. Doctors are not reviewing them at every interaction. And we assume that it's something. This is a massive problem. I'm glad that you came up with that example. There's a lot to unpack there.
It's so true. It's so true.
Do you think, obviously coming from the perspective of a cardiologist where heart medications are even more critical, do you see this as even more of a problem? Do you encounter patients who you review a list and it's not even accurate?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. And that's a problem when these patients come to see me and they have these medication lists that are 17 medications long, which is, it's crazy to think about. And patients are on sometimes duplicated medicines. I think someone is always just assuming that that patient is going to be stopped off that medication. For instance, I've seen patients on 2 statins where
Yeah.
they were, their medication list was inaccurate. So another doctor put them on a statin, not knowing they're already on a statin. And that's not the patient's responsibility to understand that they're on 2 of the duplicate medications, because we make it very difficult. How confusing are medication names? Are we using the trade name, generic name, or anticoagulants, blood thinners? People are on the wrong doses of blood thinners, not dosed appropriately, too many blood thinners. It's just, I see it all the time. And specifically for cardiology, actually, all our medications are really unsafe if used incorrectly.
Yeah. And this is a siloing effect of all these different specialists who are just adding on medications. And that's so interesting. So, yeah, I would definitely use the word scam. I mean, we've got a system where medicines are piled on. There's no thought process, there's no reviewing. I mean, I don't know how we escape from this. Is it time issue? I mean, I don't doubt. Of course, I know that there's many good doctors out there. There's a lot of not so good doctors, but how do doctors get out of this position where within a system, they're just seen as a member of an assembly line? Do this, pass the patient off. How do we get back to those good principles, which I know we all share, of what good doctors should be?
So true. It's almost a system of copy and paste with computer records. And I think that the best you can do is get your medical record, review it. You'd be surprised on what makes into your note, what diagnosis that either you weren't told about or that has been carried forward, that everyone just copies it forward, because that's the problem with electronic health records. It's too cumbersome to put all the stuff in, so people copy it forward.
Yeah, copy and paste medicine. And after disgrace, the amount of times I've heard someone even younger in their 20s or 30s say, I just came out of a doctor's appointment for the first time in years, and they were telling me I had this problem, and it was something carried over from when I was 3 years old. And you're still telling me about it. I mean, thoughtless.
There's greater applications in this in applying, for things like disability insurance, life insurance. People can be turned down for diagnoses that are incorrect. And it's a lot harder once it gets to one of the insurance companies to take that diagnosis back.
Yeah.
If it's not really true, it got into your record
Yeah.
by accident.
That was
Through your records.
absolutely great story, Ben. Thank you for sharing that. Would you like to go next, Peter? When you first realized the system was a scam?
I think the most eye-opening moment to me is coming out of training in medicine, where we spent so many years of how to treat patients, first do no harm. And what I'm hit the most by is my interaction with insurance companies. And I think probably when I did my first quote unquote prior authorization or peer-to-peer review, where, you've ordered something that you are doing for the right reason and your insurance company blocks it. And I've gotten on the phone with other doctors that are not even in my specialty that are working for the insurance company. And there's this rhetoric going back and forth, kind of almost robotic. And a lot of times, and I remember one time where I just was like, listen, can we stop being so robotic about this and stuff? I know you're probably paid to deny it. They assume that some physicians will not take the extra step to push for an appropriate treatment. And by doing that, it won't get ordered and the insurance company will save money. There was this one time I was talking to a gentleman, it wasn't a cardiologist, it was another doctor. And I just said, listen, can we stop this and just talk like doctor to doctor? And if this is like your family member, would you feel the same? And after that, I actually got hung up on.
Oh, wow.
And, but it came through and it got approved.
Oh, but he hung up on you.
Yeah. And I think that it was probably in his mind just too hard to have that conversation. Right. And so the bigger picture is I sort of became aware of like the business of medicine with health and care insurance companies, where we're not always out for the good of the patient and where tests are being blocked that could really save patients. And I think that was a huge eye-opening moment for me. Are we really doing healthcare, or are we becoming puppets by insurance companies? And you look at insurance or medical records have shrunken down and they almost look like insurance forms. Like I used to love when I had the luxury of kind of being in training when we didn't have electronic health records. We write a paragraph about a patient, or when we first started out in health records is you would say, this is so-and-so, they're from here, they do this for work, they have, their kids are healthy and well, and this is what they're here for. Now it's just like click after click after click. And there's not really any sentences made out by humans anymore in these records. And I think it's the loss of just like, what are we doing and where is this going? Are we ordering stuff just because the insurance company tells us to, we can't do? Are we really practicing medicine? I think that's where I just realized the bigger picture is that I don't have control of what I think is the best thing to treat patients. And that's a daily frustration with a lot of doctors, but also with you as patients. I mean, I think that if you can think of how many times that a medication wasn't covered for you, or like you got denied a test, or just anything that you've been frustrated with the medicine can usually come down to some component of this.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to interrupt that tremendous discussion for a moment to tell you about our expanding health and well-being store. I'm very proud of our natural, uniquely formulated products. Check in the links down below. We've got our natural anti-inflammation immune support, bone support, memory support, heart support, and sleep support. Also, our newly released organic chai mix based on the tea that I regularly drink. We are made in the USA and very proud to be working with a veteran-owned company. Ohighwellness.com if you're in the USA, North America. Ohighwellness.co if you're in the UK, Europe. All right, back to the discussion. Yeah, it's very profound as well, what you've shared there, Peter. And I didn't know how anyone, obviously this conversation is unique to the United States. I know we have a lot of watchers in other countries like the United Kingdom, which has its own fair share of problems. But in the US, I don't know how anybody who has ever received a bill, because ultimately we can recount our frustrations to you as doctors, but really what matters is you. You are the ones who matter. You're the ones who need care. And we're trying to do a certain job, but I don't know how anybody who's ever received a bill in the United States could ever come to any conclusion other than the entire system and the way insurance works is a complete scam. Seriously, how could anybody argue with that? I've had that discussion on social media, even doctors who experience it. I mean, the way that items are billed, the amounts that you still have to pay out of pocket, even though you have good insurance, it is insane.
Oh, the hyperization of prices. I mean, they know that insurance companies will only reimburse you this amount. So what do? You inflate the prices so you'll get more from the insurance company, and people who don't have adequate insurance are the ones who get hit with that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this as two doctors, and I know you both think very similar to me in terms of we want to return to the good old days where doctors knew their patients, had time with them, would be known to the community. Those days were not that long ago. We grew up with that, and everything has changed. How do we get that back? Do you think that with our current model of insurance that it's impossible to go back to those days and get away from this scam?
Well, I also think insurance companies are shielded in a lot of way from knowing any of these people or having any real responsibility. I can tell you, it feels very different when you know a person and you've taken care of them for a while and you know their family and you're responsible for their care. I can tell you, it becomes very hard to want to do something that's going to hurt them for your benefit. I think if you're an insurance company and you never meet any of these people and they're just numbers on a piece of paper, it becomes a lot easier for them to go out and do these things that are hurting people. The reason we get so upset is because these people become your friends in time. You know them, you know their whole family, they rely on you, you have this relationship. So you work really hard to help them. But I think the problem is these disconnected entities that have control over the decisions that are made about people they don't care about, and that is a mistake, and there needs to be some way to rectify it. I don't know how hard.
And we know, Ben, that some of those decisions aren't even made by people some days too.
Correct.
I mean, we know that about half a lot in the news this past year with healthcare. It's just in healthcare insurance companies, how AI has been used to really just deny across the board access to care.
Yeah, it is. It's a tragedy for many hundreds of millions of people. All right, gentlemen, thank you for those two stories. I will tell my moment when I realized that things are not as they seem and the medical system is a complete and utter scam. But actually, this equally applies to the medical profession. Now, I'd suspected that something was wrong for a few years, but the pandemic, boy, when that hit, did I see constant crazy things happening. Those of you who watch me regularly probably knew that I may say this. And starting right from the beginning, the illogical response to the pandemic, lockdowns to a virus which had already widely spread. And then what governments were doing all over the place, whether we're talking about state governments in the United States or entire nations, made no sense. But I would like to emphasize that not a single thing that you saw during the pandemic would have happened anywhere without the blessings of the medical profession, because where else were people getting their advice from? But the key moment for me was when the shots came out. What was that, December of 2020? And there was all this news across CNN and other mainstream media outlets about this safe and effective, what was it, 98% safe and effective. But when I actually heard that story, I immediately went to the medical journal where the study result was published, the New England Journal of Medicine. I took the 5 minutes it takes to actually read the article, and anybody can do this. This article is available online. And I immediately had questions, and I thought, well, this is not going to end the pandemic. And there's enormous question marks here over how long it's being tested for, the true efficacy. But all I saw around me was the medical profession jumping on the bandwagon, taking selfies, saying the end, getting their shots. And all along, I was saying, this isn't going to be what you think. The virus is still going to spread. People are still going to get infected despite what the medical establishment is saying. And the very sad thing for me is that around me, and I know this doesn't apply to the two of you who I knew at the time and were thinking like me, but I was asking around in real life and online, and I was asking doctors, have you actually read the study? And overwhelmingly, the answer was no, we haven't read the study. And I said, these are really obvious questions. I published a blog post at the time. And then I kept doing this every 3 months. I kept asking around me, have you actually taken 5 minutes to read the study? And overwhelmingly, I was hearing, no, I haven't read the study yet. And I was thinking, what are you doing? Are you going on what the mainstream media is saying? Are you just doing what you're told from above? How can you not have the same questions as me? And I knew I had excellent natural immunity and obviously didn't need it anyway. It wasn't an issue for me. But when I saw the medical profession abandon basic common sense, and for me, elementary grade education about natural immunity, how you respond to an evolving respiratory virus, it made me realize that the entire system is a scam, and either doctors are not speaking up, either the medical profession hasn't been educated properly, or they're abandoning their duty, because the job of a doctor is to tell the truth, not jump on board a bandwagon, follow what the mainstream media tells them. That's when I realized that the entire system is a scam. And I think there's little hope. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic, but I don't understand how doctors in their hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands could not have these very basic questions and not stand up for things like natural immunity and against mandates, which were never indicated for this particular circumstance. I think for any circumstance, but they all jumped on board. So that is when I realized that the system was a scam. It may sound rather profound here after what you talked about, because I'm actually saying the entire medical profession, large segments of it. I'm not saying all doctors are bad, but I think that showed me that the system is a scam and things are not working as intended and doctors are not telling the truth.
No, I agree with you. I think what you're describing is the very heart of medicine is broken and that it's been corrupted is basically what you're seeing. And that, the only hope that I think comes out of it is I don't think you're alone. I do think there are large portions, maybe not of doctors and of the medical industry, but of the public that saw what you saw and that feel the same way. And I've heard from enough patients and enough people to give me hope that people said, hey, this there was something very wrong here, and I don't ever want to see that again.
You know, you're not alone still because we're here with you.
Thank you.
Brett, yeah, exactly. No, it's true. It's about the bandwagon, afraid to speak up, and they just assumed. And I think that's what we talked about in previous discussions is assuming that it's the right thing to do because everyone else is doing it. And I think that's the problem with healthcare. We just assume too much that that the doctor is out for the best care or you're doing the right thing because we're just assuming that because this other doctor did it or everyone else is doing it, that it's right.
That's true. So yeah, that would be my story about when I realized the system wasn't what it should be. And thank you for sharing your stories as well. We're speaking very openly and transparently as three doctors who want a return to the original principles of Hippocrates. We want medicine to be as it was just a few decades ago, practiced in the right way, not corrupted by business interests, whether we're talking about insurance, whether we're talking about pharmaceutical industry, medicines being piled on. And that's what we hope to continue bringing to you in these discussions. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this discussion, please check in the links down below, our separate, unique channel where we have a lot of these discussions and post some exclusive content. Also in the links below, our natural health and wellbeing store, ohighwellness.com if you're in the USA, North America, ohighwellness.co if you're in the UK, Europe. Stay strong, everyone. Keep going. Don't despair. There are good doctors out there. We're all rooting for you. And we'll speak again next time.